been accomplished in your name, we'd have an opportunity to rejoice together. Also, Lord, to get a burden to pray more for the needs that have come in contact, not just for the physical needs, but importantly for the spiritual ones. Lord, we pray that you would give Tom here the wisdom to express the need well and give us the ears to understand and hear exactly what you're trying to accomplish as they continue to work and glorify you in their ministries, both here and around the world. Praise these now in your holy and precious name. Amen.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Can you all hear me?
Oh, yeah.
I brought some pictures for you, and I want to tell you a little bit. Before I get too far into this, okay, let me turn this on. Can you all see the map? A year ago, when Russia decided to start their special operation, when they invaded Ukraine, Grace and I prayed about things, and I'm not going to spend too much time on the past, but I want to bring you up to date on a few things. Anyway, we prayed in May of last year. We went to Romania, and we spent most of a month in Romania working with Ukrainian refugees. We were with a group called a Jesus Mission. It's a missions group. It's non-denominational, and although we learned a lot and we gained a lot of insight and it was good for us, we were very disappointed because they weren't evangelistic. They didn't share the gospel. They brought food, they brought stuff, they helped kids and resettled people, but they didn't share the gospel. And they needed to hear the gospel. So we were very disappointed with them, and when we left at the end of May, we thought that probably we would never go back. However, we did meet some we met some missionaries in Bucharest who are from Cru, which was Campus Crusade. Now they call it Cru. In August, we really felt that God was calling us to go back, and we went back to Ukraine. And we visited a family in western Ukraine, and then we also went into Ukraine. And this was the first time that we'd actually spent time in the country, and we were in a place called Kamyansk. And Kamyansk is about an hour west of Dnipro, along the Dnieper River, and it's relatively close to where the war is, but it's not in the war zone. And we actually heard from a Cru missionary pastor that's in Kamyansk, and he called us at 5:30 in the morning one morning and talked to us, and he actually literally begged us to come and help them because they needed help. And not having any other knowledge of him or any other information to go on, we stepped out in faith, and we went back in August, and we met them in Chernovitz in western Ukraine, and they drove us to Kamyansk. And after that month, we had many opportunities to share the gospel, and it was incredibly a blessing for us and for them, and we were just excited about it. But when we left, again, Grace made the comment that this will probably be our last trip. And of course, you've heard me say several times, but God had other plans. So in November, we went back the third time. Now this time, we made the plans, we arranged things a little bit differently, and I want to show you a couple of things. The first trip we were there, we delivered food. We were over here in Romania, right about the middle of Romania in Cluj-Napoca, and we drove up and around here down to Mykolaiv, and we delivered food in Mykolaiv. At that time, Mykolaiv was about 25 miles from the Russian lines, and at night we could hear the artillery shells falling. Nothing fell where we were, but we could actually hear the explosions of the artillery shells. In November, we went to Warsaw, and we took a bus down here to Lviv, that's it right there, Lviv, and then we took the train from Lviv across to Kamyansk, which is about right there on the Dnieper River. And Dnipro is the big city on the other side of the river over here. So we were, and the Russians, you've heard of Luhansk and Donetsk and The thing that's in the news now is Bakhmut, which is over in here somewhere. I'm not sure exactly. Zaporizhzhia is where the nuclear power plant has been in the news. So all of this stuff is not that far from Dnipro. And Dnipro gets bombed periodically to destroy infrastructure. It's not part of the war, but it's, of course they want to destroy the infrastructure. So, why is this not? All right, Pastor Arnie, how do I turn that thing off?
Turn which off?
The laser, instead of hitting, oh, I'm pushing the wrong button, I'm sorry. Got to be smarter than the device, that's all. Okay, we arrived in November in Warsaw, our first stop, and we were greeted by snow and mist and fog, and it was kind of a miserable, cold, chilly time. We spent 2 days there. We had to get a cell phone that we could use. Our cell phones wouldn't work over there, and we had to get a cell phone that we could put a SIM card in to have communications. And we made our travel arrangements. We booked our bus tickets. We booked our train tickets. And then we set out for Ukraine. Our second stop was Lviv. Again, we were greeted by snow. And you can see that we were smart enough to bring warm clothes. We were ready for the cold. They had told us that it was going to be very cold, and it was. I don't recommend Ukraine in winter. If you're going for a holiday, it's not the best time to go. So we were in Lviv. It's in western Ukraine. I showed you on the map, and it's far from the war. It's on the completely other end of the country. But the Russians want to terrorize the Ukrainians, so they shoot missiles over there periodically to blow up infrastructure. They want to shut off the power. They want everybody to be cold and miserable. They want the lights to be out. So we took the train from here. The next day, we spent one night in Lviv in the hotel. Oh, by the way, they have air raid sirens when there's a chance of missiles coming in. So when we got up and went down to breakfast the morning we left Lviv, the air raid sirens went off. And we didn't know, but when the air raid sirens go off, they turn off the elevators for safety's sake, obviously. So we ended up trekking back up 6 flights in the stairs because there were no elevators. So we had to trek up and get our stuff and carry it all down the stairs. So anyway, we got on the bus. This is the bus schedule. The only thing that's in English is platform, train, route, and arrival and departure. Everything else is in Ukrainian, and you can see why it's hard to travel in Ukraine. If you don't speak Ukrainian or Russian, it's very difficult to travel, especially if you can't find anybody that speaks English. So we figured it out, and we got on our train, and we took the train. And let me back up just a second, though. When we arrived in Lviv from the bus, they dropped us off along the highway. They didn't take us to a bus terminal or a train station. They just dropped us off along the highway, and then they went on somewhere else. Nobody on the bus spoke English. We had no idea where we were, and the only thing around us was a liquor store. Right in front of where the bus stopped was a liquor store. The owner of the liquor store didn't speak English. But God, a man was standing there. He arrived there in a car, and we talked to him a little bit, and Grace found out that he spoke English. And he was waiting for his wife, who was coming on another bus. And that man was kind enough to stand there and wait with us and help us to get a taxi and put us in the taxi. And he and his wife stood there and waited until the taxi came, and he saw us off safely in the taxi before he left us. And again, it was God's grace, because we had no idea what we were going to do. But we were trusting that God was going to take care of us. So anyway, we went to the train station, and that picture is our berth on the train. Now that's first class berth. It's about 6 feet square, and there's 2 benches along the sides to sleep on or sit on, little table, TV that doesn't work, and a nice big picture window so you can watch the landscape go by. Only problem with that was we got on the train at almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and before very long it was dark outside and there was no landscape to watch. So we just closed the window or closed the blinds and slept, or tried to sleep. The train tracks in Ukraine are not the smoothest. They're not bad. We didn't have any problems, but it was interesting. So, still trying to push the wrong button. Okay, I'll get to that in a minute, but this is our next day. We arrived in the morning in Kamyansk. Pastor Dimitro and his family met us, and they took us home and gave us a nice hot Ukrainian breakfast, and we had time to go to our hotel and check in and rest. And whenever we're there, Pastor Dimitro, his name is Dimitro Ostapinko, and he's the pastor of the church, the one who called us, and they have a little Baptist church there. They're really not independent Baptists, but they're very conservative, like independent Baptists, and we really like that. And they absolutely want to preach the gospel. They're not about anything more than preaching the gospel. So anyway, as we were approaching, we were riding cross country that next morning, and we had no idea how far we were. We couldn't read the signs on the train to tell how far we were from our stop. And the coach attendant came to us and talked to us in broken English and said, "Your stop is 2 stops away." So we knew to get our stuff ready. And again, God took care of us because we didn't even know we had a coach attendant until that point. So and this was the first evening. We went to Simona. This is Simona back here and her husband Kola. And you notice he's holding the light up. There was no power. They have rolling blackouts because so much of the infrastructure has been destroyed. They can't keep up with the power demands. So different communities, different cities have rolling blackouts. So they just turn the lights off for several hours. So the first night we were there, they had no power. Now they're fortunate enough to have a wood stove, so they have heat, but they had no power. And this is one of our new translator. This is Yarik. This is his father over here, but this is Yarik. He's a college student, and he translated for us. And this is Lisa. She was our translator the first time we were there, and she translated again. Lisa is a teacher, so she couldn't be with us all the time, and Yarik is a student and couldn't be with us all the time. So they kind of worked around their schedules and took turns translating for us because neither one of us speak Ukrainian, and I think our brains are too old to learn Ukrainian at this point. If we were going to live there, we would make an effort to learn, but you got to learn the alphabet first because they have a completely different alphabet. So anyway, that was our first night. We sat there and made plans, and they made a list about this long of things that we're going to do in the next 3 weeks. And this was the next day, the first order of business. We went to the grocery supermarket and we bought food to take to refugees. That's something that we've done every place we've gone there, is to bring food or supplies to them. But I want to make something really clear. Pastor Dimitro talked to me, and they always asked us if we can help them buy food. They never came to us and said, "We need you to do this, we need you to do that." They always came to us and asked us if we could help them. And he made it very clear. He said, he told us, "If you come here with no money, we don't care. We need you. We don't. I mean, it's nice that we can buy food for them, but they're surviving on their own, and they want us to be there because it encourages the people and it gives them hope, and we can share the gospel to them." And we saw lives changed, and we saw souls saved while we were there. So they're more interested in us being there than they are in us bringing a pocket full of money. Now, it's nice to go there with enough money to buy food and socks and different things. So, but that we go to the supermarket and we buy however many people we're going to visit that day. We buy enough food to bring them. It's all dry goods for the most part. There is cooking oil there, but we take it to the refugees. This is the church on the left side here. These are the bags of food that we bagged up with volunteers. And this was our first stop after we bagged up the food. This is Nikolaivka. If you heard our story the last time we visited Nikolaivka, a lot of these are the same children that were there then. It's a village with an elementary school that's been turned into a refugee center. And these families have been living there some of them for years now, because they have no place to go. There's two kinds of refugees. There's the ones that have money that leave Ukraine, and the ones who don't have money who have to stay, but they escaped from the war zone. So they're living in schools, they're living in hotels, they're living wherever the government can put them up, or the community can put them up. There's some ladies that run this. The lady standing in the back there is a volunteer, and she helps take care of the people and make sure that they have rules and they have cleaning assignments and things. And she's also a refugee herself. Our next stop was to visit Natalie and Irina. You probably remember that picture, a similar picture from the last time. Irina is 18, and she's basically, mentally, she's an infant. And her mother takes care of her. She does have a stepfather, a husband who's with a stepfather, but we visited a lot of special needs kids while we were there. The church has a special ministry for special needs children. Some are physical needs, mental needs, different things. But the one thing that we saw in common was that there's no fathers in the picture, almost in every case. This being one exception, and this wasn't actually the father of the child, but a stepfather. But most of the dads just said, I don't want to be part of this, and left when they found out their child was special needs. And the mothers have been the backbone and kept them safe and kept them going. So the church has a special program for them and helps them as much as possible. And of course, they always share the gospel. And in fact, Natalie is a devout Christian. She's a born-again believer, and she evangelizes her apartment block. That most people live in giant apartment blocks that were built by the Russians, the Soviet Union, and they're ugly, nasty places. I mean, inside it's what you want it to be because you can make it as comfortable as possible, but the outside is just a big slab of concrete and steel grids over the windows, and they're ugly. And this is actually a picture I borrowed from the internet, but this is what's happening in Ukraine. The Russians are blowing up infrastructure. They're blowing up power transformer stations. They're blowing up power plants. They're blowing up water pumping stations, anything that they can do to make life miserable for the Ukrainians. They're not winning the war, so that's their goal, is to make life miserable so that the Ukrainians will come to the negotiating table. But so far, I've never talked to anybody that wants to go negotiate with the Russians. I've never met that person in Ukraine yet. And this picture is not really significant. I just really like the ingenuity of the Ukrainians. The trams in the city are all electric. So when the power goes off, the trams are dead in the water. So, they brought the farm tractor out and they towed the tram back. I assume they took it to the barn, wherever they take them. They don't pull them around the city with tractors, but I just thought that was a cool picture. Just shows that they do. Now, I don't know if you've seen pictures on the internet, but they also go out with farm tractors and they pull Russian tanks in and they bring them back and recondition them and put them back in the war, fighting against the Russians. So, this picture, we visited this group, these ladies, and some of them have husbands that are involved. They call themselves the Cake Army, and every day they bake cakes, they bake cookies, they bake breads, they bake meat pies, all kinds of baked goods, and they box them up and they take them to the soldiers on the front lines. They have people that drive every day or every couple of days and go to the front lines to deliver food to the soldiers. And it was just really a privilege for us to sit down with them, and they made cakes and of course tea. If you're in Ukraine in the wintertime, you've got to have tea. There's nothing else. I mean, tea is the drink in Ukraine. And it's also a huge part of hospitality. They have to serve tea. So we visited with them, and you'll notice that it's kind of gloomy there, and the only lighting is lanterns again because there was no power this night either. We spent 2 days without power because after the bombing in Dnipro, all the power went off for the city for 2 days. We lived in our hotel with no electricity for 2 days. The first day we had no water. The second day we had water, but no hot water. And we were much more fortunate than a lot because we were in a big concrete building that kind of held the heat. So we weren't freezing to death, and we had plenty of blankets. Other people weren't so fortunate. The worst part for me personally was not having water to take a shower. I couldn't bring myself to take a cold shower because it wasn't that warm in the hotel. Grace kind of took a shower, but I'll pass. Bird baths are good enough. And this was another lady that we visited. She lives on a farm in the country. Babushka's grandma. She's a grandmother. She had a daughter who was handicapped, but she was going out in the streets and witnessing and handing out tracts and inviting people. And they had actually started a house church in their house. But then her daughter was killed she was hit by a car and killed. So grandma wasn't able to keep the house church going, but there's local pastors that have kind of embraced it and helped with the people, and some of them are still going to church. But she was so excited to have us come and visit her. At the same time, she was so sad because she had no heat, she had no electricity. It was, we're in the house wearing coats, which was okay for us, but it bothered her. And the worst thing for her was that she couldn't make tea for us. She wanted so badly to make tea for us. And so I don't know anything more about her. In fact, I don't even know her name. We were told, but I didn't write it down, and that's in here and out there. So anyway, and we were there on Thanksgiving. Here in America, it was Thanksgiving, the 24th, and they didn't really celebrate Thanksgiving. Now, they have a festival, a harvest festival in the churches in October where they celebrate the harvest, and it's another opportunity to share the gospel. But we invited all the core group from the church. That's Pastor Dima on the right, and his wife Anya, and the number 99 or 89, whatever that is, that's their son, and their daughter's sitting down there. But anyway, that's the core group of the church, and we invited them to have Thanksgiving dinner. We wanted to take them out to dinner, but they said no. They said that because of the possibility of air raids, if there's an air raid, they have to close the restaurant, and also it would cost a lot of money, so they set up a place for us to have Thanksgiving dinner, and everybody brought food. And one of the husbands in the cake army had built a pizza oven, and we bought pizzas from him. We were his first paying customers for his pizzas, and they were incredibly cheap. But he gave us that. He gave it to us for half price, but they were still unbelievably cheap. But it was really a blessing to be with these people and to share bread with them and to talk. And I don't know where she is, but our translator's there somewhere so we could communicate. And this was another group that we visited. That's Simona back there in the back again, and this is her house. And these are a group of refugees that had come from Bakhmut, which, if you follow the news at all, Bakhmut is the epicenter of the war right now, and there's not much left of it. They've lost everything. So we spent a little time with them and listened to their stories, and we got to give them some food and share the gospel with them. Most of these people are not believers. They're Orthodox, which is kind of like Catholicism, but they don't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. So at every opportunity, we share the gospel and tell them that they need a Savior. And it's really hard I don't know if you've ever worked with Catholics, but it's really hard to convince Orthodox Christians that they're not saved. I saw this in the street, in the park along the street. Whosoever shall call on the name of the Lord shall be saved, Acts 2:21. There's a lot of signs like that all over. And there's also signs supporting the military, but there's a lot of faith-based signs. I don't know who puts them up. I'm not sure if they're from the Orthodox Church or if there are other Christian churches doing it, but I just thought it was really incredible. And last August, when we were there, we went to the Olympic Hotel, which is a hotel housing 100 families of refugees, and some of them have been there for a few years now. For different reasons, because of the air raid sirens and the new rules that were in place, and the fact that there was a lack of communication, we couldn't get in the hotel. We were supposed to have the dining room, but we couldn't get in. So we had an impromptu church service on the street out, on the sidewalk out in front. That's only a small portion of the group that showed up, but it was all adults. I shared our testimony and told our story and why we're there, and a lot of the people remembered us because we'd met them in August, and then Pastor Dima preached, and then Pastor Anatoly preached, And again, we didn't see any souls saved, but a lot of seeds were planted. And unfortunately, we were disappointed because there were no children, because the children all stayed inside. It was very cold outside that day. And this is the parent church of Pastor Demas. The Pastor Demas was a church plant from this church. This is a bigger Baptist church. They call it House of Prayer. This in Ukrainian says God is love. And of course that's me up there sharing our testimony. The church started at 10. Church started at 10 o'clock, and I shared our testimony and talked a little bit, and then there were two pastors that preached sermons, and it was 12:30 when we finished, so 2.5 hours. That's typical for them. I mean, they don't have hour-long services, so we had service there in the morning, and then we went to Pastor Demas' church, and I preached on the gospel. I preached the Romans Road, preached the gospel there, and then of course after I preached, Pastor Demas preached, and then Anatoly preached, and again after that we had sandwiches and a little refreshment. So there was another 2.5 hours. So our Sunday was 5 hours of church. Pastor Arnie, you could probably stretch things out a little more and see if anybody comes.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
But anyway, it's incredibly blessed time because the people really want to, they want to hear the gospel, but it's like cracking Brazil nuts with a rubber hammer. It just kind of bounces off sometimes, and it takes a long time to break the shell. The next day we went and we bought more food and supplies. This is Anya and her daughter Sophia buying tea at this particular moment. But we were buying food to visit a gypsy community, a church. This is the gypsy church. I have a picture of the sanctuary and of some kids. They asked us not to take pictures of the adults because the Roma, or the Roma is the proper name for them, but they're gypsies. You've probably heard stories about gypsies. Well, some of those stories are true. They didn't want us to take pictures because some of them are wanted by the police. So they didn't want their pictures published anywhere. So we respected that, and we didn't post any pictures. Now the kids, it was fine. These are the gypsy kids. Grace is back there in the back. She shared with the kids while I was sharing with the adults. We had a full house. The room was full when we had the service. There were standing room only. The gypsy pastor is using a Baptist church in the village to have his church, and there's a growing movement among the gypsies to be evangelized. I mean, there's gypsy pastors that are being turned out to evangelize the gypsies, and the gypsies need to hear the gospel. So it was a blessing for us. We didn't really get too involved. We were only there for one service, but they begged us to come back. They always everybody wants us to come back. That's the big thing. They want us to come back. And then we visited a camouflage netting factory. Camouflage netting is made by hand. They've been doing this since Crimea was invaded. It's done by volunteers. They don't get any funds from the government or from any outside organizations. They provide everything themselves. They get donations of cloth, clothing, blankets, bed sheets, whatever, and they have washing machines, and they dye it to make it white or brown, whatever the color they want to make it. And they make it there. It's an undisclosed location, and the people are facing the other way, so there's no faces. So they didn't want it to be published. And the picture on the right, for those of you who don't know, that's a ghillie suit. This is a picture of a picture. That model her picture was taken modeling a ghillie suit. Ghillie suits are what snipers use to hide themselves. But they make those by hand. They tie each little piece of that, one knot at a time. And we had the privilege of visiting an army encampment along the Dnieper River in Dnipro. Their assignment right now is to guard a bridge crossing the river. And we were actually surprised that they allowed us to take their pictures, but they were fine with it. They said they didn't care. But we gave the yellow and blue books are Ukrainian New Testaments. The other little booklet is a soldier's prayer book. And we talked to them and spent some time with them, prayed with them. Anatoly spoke to them. I don't know exactly what his message was. It was in Ukrainian, and there wasn't time for the translator to translate. So we didn't really hear the message, but I know that anytime Anatoly preaches, he preaches the gospel because he's very passionate about the gospel. This guy over here in the corner, that's Anatoly. And that's Pastor Dima sitting down there. Of course, that's me and Grace. Before we left, 4 of those guys tore the patches off their uniforms and gave them to me to remember them and to pray for them. I have a little Ukrainian flag patch, and he said that patch was worn on the front lines in Bakhmut, which, it meant something to me. It was kind of an emotional time because they told us we're heroes for coming to visit them, coming from the United States, and we told them that they're the heroes, that we're not heroes, that we're just doing what God asked us to do. I have a lot of respect for the Ukrainian soldiers because they're fighting at such a disadvantage and they're still winning in many cases. This is the village in Nikolaevka. We went back and we had a little Christmas party with the kids and gave them all gifts. These are some of the same kids that we saw before. And when we were there, we went through the wordless book the colors bracelets with them. And the kids that had made professions of faith the first time we were there in August, we were pleasantly surprised to find that they all still, they knew the answers. They knew what they had done, and they convinced us that they were saved because they still could tell us what it meant, each of the colors. This little boy right here in front, I haven't been using my notes here. I don't really need them, but I need to get his name. Did anybody read that number? 24. I don't have the best eyes. Anyway, that little boy is Nazar. And when he doesn't live in the school. He's not one of the refugees in the school. And when we started handing out gifts, he started crying because he assumed he wasn't going to get a gift because he didn't live there. But we had plenty of gifts, and we made sure that he got a gift. And then the lady that runs that took us aside and explained to us that Nazar lives on a farm down the road, and he comes there to play with the kids because he's lonely. And we learned that his mother is a war widow. She had been widowed for about a month. So he lost his father, and he goes there to be with other kids. And so we brought some things to them, and we shared the gospel with her and talked to her and gave them a Bible and food, of course, and spent a little bit of time. We didn't have a lot of time to spend with them, but I mean, that's a scene that's being played out all over Ukraine right now. There's just so many families that have been destroyed by this. And I always want to tell people, you see the dog down here? The black dog? That dog's a goat. A very friendly goat. This Dima's brother Oleg this is an incredible group of people. I'm telling you, they're just so into the Lord's work. He converted his garage into a youth center, and he has weekly youth nights, or youth group. These are kids from the two churches and the community that they gather every week, and they have a service, and they play games, they sing, they play music, and they have lessons, and they learn about God. And a lot of these kids are saved, not all of them. They're working on it. But we were excited to find kids that could speak English there. Some of them are studying and they speak some English, so they were all happy to come and talk to us and show us their English skills. Some pretty good, some not so good. That young lady in purple back there ended up being our translator. She's very fluent in English, and believe it or not, she's only 14. This is the church. We had an early Christmas. Our last Sunday in Ukraine, we had an early Christmas service at Dima's church. I preached a Christmas message wrapped around the gospel, and we had a celebration. we had a standing room only crowd. We had that one little tiny room. We had 70 people in there. I mean, it was literally standing room only. And you notice all these people are wearing coats. There's no heat in their church. None. I mean, it's cold. Of course, when you put 70 bodies in there, it warms up. And these are the kids from the church, and that's Anatoly. He led the kids to come out, and they sang for us. And we had a Bible quiz with the kids with Yard translating, and he makes balloon animals, so he treated them all the balloon animals, and everybody there got a gift, including a pair of warm socks, and all the adults got tea. No better gifts for people there at the time. But they got other things too, food and different things. There were actually more than 70 people who got gifts, and these are just a few of the people. And I don't have it on the slide, but 5 people got the greatest gift of all. After I did my message, then Pastor Dima did a message, and Anatoly did a message. And somewhere in that process, something clicked in these 5 men, and they all came forward at the end of the service and asked Jesus to be their Savior. So 5 men got saved. And these are men that have been preached to so many times. They've heard the gospel over and over and over. They're all Orthodox, but now they're believers. So that was the greatest Christmas gift of all. And this was our farewell dinner before we left. They made us honorary Ukrainians. They gave us Ukrainian shirts. And of course, again, you notice the pictures are kind of blue looking or purple looking. I don't really know why the color came out the way it did, but there were no lights on. It was blackout again. So we had a nice dinner, and this dish right here is Grace's favorite. It's a cream sauce with a layer of fish, and then there's cabbage and beets. And I tried it once at one of the things we had, and I forced myself to eat the little portion that I took on my plate, but I was smart enough not to take it again. It's not to my taste, I got to tell you. But it's purple because it's got beets in it. And again, it was at Kola and Simona's house. They're just incredible people. Let me share a little bit about them. Simona's involved in everything. She sings every time we go out somewhere. She sings hymns. She's involved in feeding. She's involved in so many things. She has a special needs child, so she has a special place in her heart for kids with special needs. Kola is one of the people that takes things to the soldiers. He goes once a week and delivers whatever food, baked goods, whatever there is. He goes to places like Bakhmut once a week and he delivers food. And they all do it in the name of the Lord. One of the last places we went with Anatoly to his village. He had been praying for years for God to open a door for him to go there and preach the gospel. Again, it's all Orthodox. There's no believers. And but I just took this because I love that little car. That's something from the Soviet Union. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's a Lada, but I'm not sure what it is. But it's a real car. Of course, obviously it doesn't run anymore. You see this little short guy down here? I didn't go down, but Anatoly and Dima and one of the other guys went down to visit him. That man is standing up. The winter before, he got drunk and passed out in the street, and his legs froze, and he lost both legs because of alcoholism. They amputated his legs, and he lives by himself in that little house, that shack. So they brought in food, and they prayed with him, and he's not a believer. In all likelihood, he's still probably an alcoholic. I don't know, but I'm just really sad. And this is the post office village center. Well, I don't know what they call the building, but people on the left are there. They're handing out. Pastor Dima had gotten a shipment of UN. What do they call it? World Food Program boxes, and they're heavy boxes. There's like 5 pounds of rice and 5 pounds of noodles and different things in them. They don't get them very often, but he did get a shipment. And so that opened the door for them to go to the village so that Anatoly could preach the gospel to his people he grew up with and his friends and neighbors from before. And of course, this is Anatoly when he was preaching. And you know, the interesting thing is, you can't see him in that picture, but standing right next to him is an Orthodox priest. And he, because of what they brought, he allowed him to preach the gospel, and he stood right there and didn't say a word against him preaching the gospel, which is pretty unheard of. I don't think you'd see a Catholic priest stand up and let you preach the gospel. But and this was our last visit. We went to La Wojkowka and met these ladies on the left. They're part of the church. We went with a pastor. I wrote his name down last night because I couldn't remember it. Pastor Sergey, he goes there and has church in this village. He's another Baptist preacher that wants to share the gospel. And these are some of the people. This couple are both in their late 80s, and they're still going strong. They live by themselves. The two ladies took us to dinner after we went around and visited shut-ins that day. And we had borscht, of course. Borscht is the national soup. Funny thing is, everywhere we go and have borscht, it's different. It's not the same. It doesn't taste the same. The one key thing that's most of the time true is it has beets in it. Not even that all the time. This lady is affluent. She's a shut-in. She has health issues. That's Pastor Sergey there and Pastor Dima. And she moaned and cried to us about how bad everything in her life is, and she was so sad, and she won't listen to the gospel. She won't accept the gospel. All she has to look forward to is dying, because she's a lost soul and she doesn't want to be saved. This was our last night in Kamyansk. We were waiting for the train time to arrive, and if you go up the stairs behind us to the platform, it's covered in ice. They had an ice storm the day we left, and everything was covered in ice. And we walked up, and Dima's father, Nikolai, that's Nikolai, he was carrying one of our bags, and the other bag's there somewhere, I don't know where it is, but they wouldn't let us carry the bags. They wouldn't let us do anything. And they made us go straight to the train and get on the train and walk through the train all the way to the back where our car was, and they carried the bags down the platform and put them on our train because they didn't want us to fall and get hurt. And of course, they could have gone. You know. But anyway, we walked through the train, and they had talked to the coach attendant to be sure and be there to greet us and make sure we got our bags, and they took care of us, even though we really didn't have a proper goodbye because we couldn't say goodbye on the platform because it was literally glazed. It was like a skating rink on the platform. I don't know why they didn't have salt. Maybe they don't have any. I don't know. And our last 2 days when we got back to Warsaw, Warsaw is predominantly Catholic, and Christmas is very, very big there. Everything's decorated, everything's lit up, and it was just an incredibly beautiful place. This is the old town square. Now all of that was, I read the history a little bit, all of that was destroyed in World War II, and they rebuilt it to look like it did before, because most of Warsaw was bombed and destroyed in World War II. But they were all, this is early December, and they're all prepped for Christmas already. And while we were in Warsaw on Sunday, it was snowing like crazy, but we had found this little missionary Baptist church that we went to visit. And fortunately, I didn't have to do any driving when we were in Warsaw. We took Uber everywhere. And we went to this little church, and there weren't very many people there that day because of the weather. There was about 6 inches of snow. And this is Pastor Sock. He's the missionary pastor. He's from Baltimore, and he's been there for 20-some years. He preached in broken Polish. After 20 years, he still doesn't speak fluently, but he does all right. And he had slides that were in Polish and English and Romanian, and so we were able to follow along, and he would stop once in a while and give us a sidebar as to what he was talking about and where he was. We could follow pretty well, but it was a blessing to go there and encourage him. And we went, after church, we went up and we had Polish dumplings. We had a meal. They do that every Sunday. They have a meal after church. And church started at 11, and we left there about 2:30-ish. And he said that normally after the meal they have Sunday school, but because of the snow he canceled, so they only had, I don't know, whatever that is, 3.5 hours. But normally it's an all afternoon thing for them. So I'm telling you, you gotta step up your game. And this was our last day. This was Monday. This is back in the area where the old town is. There was about 6 inches of snow on the ground, and it was incredibly beautiful, but cold. And we flew back the next day. Do I have time for questions?
Probably take 2 or 3 minutes.
Anybody got a question? Let me say one thing so I don't forget, John, before you. We are planning to go back again in May-June timeframe. We don't have a definite date yet. For those of you who don't know, we're gathering things to have a yard sale in April. If you go out in the whatever that is out there, you'll find there's lots of stuff stored out there right now. Pastor Arnie was kind enough to let us store things out there. We're gathering things wherever we can to have a yard sale. We actually gave some things to Barbara when she moved into her apartment, and it's good to see her out of jail.
Right.
So anyway, go ahead, John.
The orgies, the Polish dumplings.
Yes, and that's another thing that depends on where they are and who cooks them. They're all different. But Matt,
I was just wondering. You said you went and bought food to distribute, and it looked like the stores were well stocked. There's no problems with getting.
there's plenty of food. I mean, there are times when we go and there may not be enough of something on the shelf, but they'll get another supply. There's plenty of food, but there's no money to buy it. That's the problem. The people that need it don't have money. They came from Donetsk or wherever they came from, Kharkiv, whatever place they came from. They came with nothing except the bag they were carrying and the clothes on their back. They don't have bank accounts, and the people that have the money, most of them were able to leave, and they left Ukraine. They're in Europe somewhere. Some of them are even here in the United States.
How's the cost of the food compared to here?
Cheaper. Not cheap, but cheaper than here. It's really, you can buy a lot. The exchange rate is 36 hryvnia to $1, and you can get more for your buck, more for your dollar there. But if you don't have any, then it doesn't matter what it is, because who I heard. Yes, Sharon.
Do they have spices in the food?
Spices. Most everything has spices, and sour cream is a staple. Everything comes with sour cream. Not everything, but a lot of things come with sour cream. So Pastor Carroll, I remember when he went to Hungary, he complained that everything had sour cream, and he hates sour cream.
Welcome to Europe, right?
Yes, welcome to Europe. Romania was the same way. Lots of sour cream. The foods are very similar between those Eastern European countries. There's a lot of overlap. Any other questions?
Exactly what fundamentals of Ukrainian Orthodox disagree with the Christianity we have?
Well, that'll take me more than a minute to answer, but they're very much like the Catholic Church. They pray to Mary. They don't believe in having a personal relationship. They don't believe in. They believe you're saved because of what Jesus did on the cross, but we have to have a role in that. We have to accept His gift, and they don't understand that part. They need to understand the personal relationship, because
You say there's an element of works necessary.
works is a big part of it. You have to be good enough to go to heaven. Which, if you've heard the gospel, you're not good enough to go to heaven on your own. You have to have Jesus, and they don't think that way. And also, they have all the sacraments, but the Orthodox Church has way more icons, I would call them idols, than the Catholic Church. They have a picture of somebody, and they pray to the pictures, and they kiss the pictures, and just all kinds of things like that are different.
I think that's, again, a good reminder of why even the 5 men that you mentioned that accepted Christ. They heard the gospel many times, but they had to realize they were lost first.
And you have to be very careful. You can't get in somebody's face and say,
Oh, no.
because you're Orthodox, you're going to hell, because, that's, you can't confront people like that. You have to lead them by the hand and explain to them why they need to know Jesus Christ as their personal Savior. And that's why it's so important for people to be there. Yes, I saw a hand.
What percentage of them would you say they're Orthodox? General knowledge, what is the percentage per country?
I would say that probably 95% of the country identify as Orthodox, but a lot of them are like people here who identify as Christians, and they go, or Catholics here who go to Mass on Easter and Christmas, and that's the extent of their faith. Now I don't have a problem. There are believers in the Catholic Church. I know there are. I know some that are believers, but the Catholic Church, I believe, has misled people with what's the word I'm looking for?
There's some errant doctrine. I would say there's a lot of times in the Orthodox as well as Catholic, you'll find a lot of times that you find believers that are in there almost in spite of the teachings.
Well,
of the church.
they've heard the gospel somewhere else.
Correct.
And they
Not
didn't hear
because
it.
of what they heard at the Catholic or the Orthodox Church.
Because yes, Don.
I'd say one more question.
One of the icons that they might worship, the Archangel Michael.
I haven't studied Orthodoxy that well, but I know that they have pictures. They have, gilded, framed images, and they're not pictures of Jesus. They're pictures of saints and various things. Last question.
Okay. You showed the map of Ukraine earlier.
Yes.
There was a big river that was going through the eastern part. Was it the Volga?
No. Let me go back. I'll show you. And then I'll shut down here. Probably was an easier way to do this, but
No, it's probably about the best way, actually.
okay, here we go. See right up there it says Dnieper River? The D's kind of silent. It starts way up here in Belarus and it runs all the way down and comes out down here. That's the Dnieper River. And I don't know, one of the other rivers, the Rhine, I think, is over here. I'm not sure. I don't know my European rivers that well, but one of the famous rivers is
That's
over.
the one Dnieper.
The Volga's in Russia.
But it doesn't extend that.
That's about the extent of my knowledge of where the Volga is, but I know it's in Russia.
There we go.
So thank you.
Thank you for the update. It was it's always good to know.
I just want to say real quick, I appreciate all of you. I appreciate your prayers. I appreciate your words of encouragement, and we're very thankful for this church, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you, and God bless you.
Yeah. And their souls, so that'll be marked to our credit as we support them as they go out, they reach these. They're going to Ukraine. They minister on the eastern shore all the time. We have a
And
ministry here. We can work together to accomplish the
April
gospel.
1st, we'll be at Plow Days.
Plow Days, pray for them. Good opportunity to get a lot of gospel out, like the fair ministry that we have in August. So let's close the word of prayer and we'll dismiss the morning service. Father, thank you for the time. Thank you for the challenge. Thank you for the information, the update. Pray you give us an opportunity to be renewed in our prayers, to support the gospel going out, whether it be here, or the eastern shore, or even across the globe. And all those things would be your honor and glory as we prepare for the morning service. Our hearts even now have an opportunity to gather together here and worship around your name. Once another encourage one another. Praise you, your holy and precious name. Amen.